Hey everyone, welcome back to a brand new Take Aim podcast. Hard to believe it's already mid-October. It seems like the season is flying by, but excited this week to have Bonnie and Mike Mcferrin on from Legends of the Fall TV. Bonnie and Mike hunt an amazing spot down in South Texas, and Texas just has so much history with deer hunting and so much just legendary kind of status with deer that I just thought it would be so neat to catch up with those guys. They've been friends of mine for a long time. Talk about the two awesome deer that both Bonnie and then Mike killed, and just their management practice down there and kind of what they do and how they hunt, because it's so unique, so vast, so dense with just brush, and just a different culture of hunting down there. And it's great. It's one of the places I've dreamed about hunting and kind of kicking off my whitetail bucket list forever. And hopefully one day I get to experience that down in South Texas, because it's just, to me, is amazing deer hunting, and I love to deer hunt. So it's an amazing show. Congrats to those guys. I can't wait to have Bonnie and Mike back on, but amazing just the amount of work and effort that Mike puts into their place down there, and Bonnie as well, and just couldn't be happier for their success. And two awesome deer that we talk about in this show. So make sure to look it up on their social media, Legends of the Fall TV. But hope you guys enjoy the show as always. All right, guys, we are live, brand new Take Aim podcast, and excited to get a new show out middle of October already, and excited to have these guys on, Bonnie and Mike Mcferrin from Texas. And everybody knows Bonnie and Mike. They've been around the industry for years, a TV show called Legends of the Fall, but excited to have you guys here today.
Thanks. Excited to be here.
Yeah, thanks for having us, Brandon.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm always excited, like, I've been friends with Bonnie and Mike, I want to say, maybe as long as anybody in my friends list in the industry, probably 12, 13 years now, and I'm always excited when I see you guys, kill really big deer, which you guys have done historically, but this year nonetheless, but you guys got it done early season, and I just kind of wanted to talk about your guys' place down in Texas, and just what Texas does is kind of legendary, and there's so much history there, and you guys this year had kind of a different type of year, being with hurricanes and warm seasons. And, Mike was just telling me offline, tall grasses, they have grown because of the late rains. But just, I kind of want to go over all that with you guys, and just how you guys kind of manage it, and how you guys ended up this week with, high temps and scoring 2 giant bucks.
Absolutely.
Well, Mike, give me a little background on your guys' place down there, and kind of, I have some questions, just being it so big and so vast, and you probably see so many deer that I would assume lots of times, maybe I'm wrong, so totally correct me, because I'm always thinking Midwest-style management, but you guys probably see a lot of deer that maybe come and go. Is that correct, or does that make it hard trying to guess a deer that you might know at 2 or 3 or 4, trying to get them into upper age groups, or do you get a lot of those deer that are new to your place?
Well, I would say that for the most part, I feel like there are people that kind of can see a deer and recognize a deer from year to year, and remember a deer, and I'm one of those people that are like that. I just have that uncanny ability to be able to see a deer and just place him back to where I've seen him before. It's just, I'm a deer nut, and it just just one of those things that I can do, and I feel like I know majority of our deer over the years. With the trail cams, we're running a lot of trail cameras over some protein feeders and stuff like that, so we get a lot of deer picks, and I feel like I really know majority of my deer herd. Now, they will range. We've been on a lease down there for 25 plus years, and I've noticed that we'll have some deer at one end of our lease that will show up at the other end of our lease, depending on the time of year, and that home range. But they'll all bachelor up on one part of the lease, and then 2 miles later they'll show up. Just before pre-rut, they'll show up at their home, what I call their home area. And years ago when I first started out, I took, would try to take either trail cam pics or we'd use spot and scopes and stuff, and then we would try to. I would keep a ledger in a journal of what time of year I saw certain bucks, especially ones with potential, so that the following year during that time frame we would kind of go over and see if they were in that same area and set up some cameras, some corn piles, and see if we could get them to show back up on camera. And historically, they tend to be in the same general vicinity every year at a certain time. I mean, I don't know if it's just our terrain, because it's a little different than the Midwest. We hunt a lot in the Midwest as well, but we're all brush. I mean, we're 90% brush with maybe 10 to 15% openings. So our deer can go anywhere. There's no natural funnel. There's no corridor. I mean, they can go under cover anywhere on our lease. So it's a little different. They can travel anywhere, undetected. So in that regard, I guess you could say you kind of try to hunt them where they've been previous years, certain times a year. That makes any sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I was going to kind of ask that question, as well as what you have seen over those 25 years, maybe the biggest difference and kind of the biggest difference, Mike, in how you and Bonnie have hunted. Maybe you can boil it down maybe to the last 10 years. Has it changed much, or did you just kind of answer that it hasn't changed much?
It's changed. It's changed quite a bit with the quality of the deer, I guess you could say. Because we've worked really hard with trying to shoot mature bucks. As far as being able to cull out genetics, that's almost impossible. In a free range environment, that's almost impossible. Just trying to take the right age class has made a huge difference. And supplemental feeding, planting food plots, water is a huge key for us, because we only get 20 inches of rain on average down there. So putting in, supplemental water holes and stuff like that just to keep the deer on our property, especially we might have 4 or 5 windmills on our property, but, they're a mile, 2 miles apart. That you can really keep deer on your property, especially around neighboring property, by having, water sources and putting them in. It's a lot of work, but I'll tell you, it pays off.
It is a lot of work.
Yeah, I bet you guys are down there a lot. It's like, I assume it's totally different in managing a farm here in the Midwest, but it's the amount of time and effort. It might boil down to be about the same thing, because as we both know, like, there's just always work to be done at the farm, or the ranch, as you guys call them,
Sure.
So
there's always something on the list that you want to get to that you just hadn't got to, whether there's something to be done. There's never any idle time. I never get down there and just say, well, I've got everything done. I'm just going to sit around and wait to hunt this afternoon. I'm like, I got to do this, and this before we go out hunting. It's just always something.
No, there's something down, or a starter needs to replace, or something's always happening like that, too, to add.
Something on the tractor, or something we have an auger that we all get and feed. I mean, it's always something. I mean, it's like especially if we hadn't been down there in, a month or something like that, I get down there and it takes me almost a day to get everything ready to work,
Yep. Get situated again and start the process over.
Or else one of the water troughs notoriously, has a leak, or a raccoon is pulled on the float, or a turkey, or just anything. Deer stepped on it. It's always something.
But Mike's work, Brandon, is so don't let him fool you with that's where he wants to be. He wants to be at the ranch all the time, and he wants to be working. So when he sounds like he's complaining at all, he's not, because that's his favorite pastime.
He's enjoying every minute of it. That's right.
Exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So what's one of the things I think would be kind of cool to ask Mike and Bonnie is, have you noticed, you guys get to hunt a lot bigger areas than, relatively speaking, in Texas than we do here in the Midwest. Have you seen something crazy? Like, do you guys get to hear about some of the deer maybe that you knew of that got shot on a neighboring ranch, and you're like, holy cow, how in the world does that work? Because here we kind of hear of like, we're broken down at 80-acre sections, so it's pretty easy to hear like, oh, Jim Smith shot this buck or that buck. But do you guys kind of have that interaction down there?
Oh, absolutely. I mean, every year we lose deer to a neighbor or a new deer show up on our pasture that, especially during the rut. We had a 180-inch deer. We'd watched him for 2 or 3 years, and they did some brush control next to us on one of our leases. Actually, they did some brush control and turned it into farmland. And that buck lived in that area, and we figured, well, he would move a little bit if it'll be on us. Well, he came right through the other part of us and went right over to the neighbors, and they shot him the next year. And we never even saw him the following year. So, I mean, we lose deer every year, I would say, and it's been like that from the beginning. And we pick up a few deer every once in a while.
And we also hear.
We hear.
We killed a giant.
Yeah.
A couple of big ones were hitting the ground. A neighbor and
the ranch that we actually hunt on, the largest deer ever killed on the ranch was killed, I guess, opening weekend. He went 262 and netted 260.
Holy, that was this year.
This year, yeah. And then that lease that deer was killed on happened to be one of our old leases that we had 20 years ago. 15, 20 years ago. Well, probably 20 years ago. And then right next door to us this year, they arrowed a 213, I think. So just literally across the creek from us this year, they killed a 213. So there's big deer hitting the ground this year, bigger deer hitting the ground this year than ever before in South Texas, in my opinion, because of all the rain that we've had, all the late, summer and spring. And especially late summer rain that was off the chart. Yeah,
tell us a little bit about that, Mike and Bonnie. How much rain did you guys get? I know typically you guys get, like 20 inches a year if you're lucky?
Typically we get 20 to 25. Sometimes we get more. But this year I think we're sitting on 29 inches, but we've got most of it from the spring to the summer. So it was like we normally September, October, we get a lot of rain, especially the month of September. But this year we got rain June, July, even, it started in April and went all the way through June through July. And with all the, extra hurricane activity in the Gulf of Mexico, and we got a lot of rain when we needed it, and it's really paid off. Yeah,
I assume a lot of your natural browse probably took off or kind of had a second regeneration. I mean, is that something that kind of maybe turned kind of the some of the bucks that you guys had on cameras, or some of the ideas that it changed some of that with all the extra browse?
It did. What normally happens is, like I said, we do a lot of protein feeding. We put out a lot of big time. We have some food plots, but when you cannot compete with the natural browse. When we have a bunch of rain, we had at the end of August, and I mean it pushed so much new growth up that they totally start leaving the cameras. I mean they stop eating corn to go eat natural browse, and it's so much obviously it's so much better for them. It's better for the antler growth than just about anything you can put out, just to have them, have plenty of natural forage, because it's a great, then you're just substituting their, nutrition with protein and attractants and stuff like that, and you're not necessarily having to support them 100%, because when it's dry down there, man antler growth goes down, because even though you're feeding them, it's not the same. They don't get as much, because they can only eat so much protein and not, have natural browse. They need natural browse to be able to digest all that stuff, in my opinion.
Good. Yeah, for sure. That's a very good point. Now, I know last year, Mike, you took like your biggest buck ever, and then this year you guys, just slammed 2 pigs. So in your opinion, Bonnie and Mike, like, what is that kind of that secret recipe? I mean, you've told us a lot already, but is Is it just being so strict on, I mean, it sounds like you do all the work day-to-day basis and, monthly basis. Is it that age structure and trying to hold it accountable to, that better genetic line of deer?
It's definitely age structure. I mean, age structure is the number one thing. It's really the only thing that you have control over. You can't control the genetics because you can't look at the dose and tell what they are.
Right.
I mean, you really control genetics. The only thing you can that's in your control realistically is age structure. And taking an older age class deer, at least let them reach their genetic potential. And I mean, I'm not one of these guys that say you have to shoot 6.5-year-old bucks because, in my other opinion is, we have deer that reach their genetic potential at 4.5, 5.5, and then they might grow a little bit, but it might be hardly insignificant to what you can actually see, or they might, grow their best antlers at 5.5 years old and kind of go down after that. So, if we see a big 5-year-old, especially if he's a giant, we might take him. We don't necessarily have to let him get to 6.5. Our management rules are 5.5, but we kind of try to build on that and go to 6.5, but we don't. That's not always the case.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I know it's so weird, and we always know there's never one answer for every question, especially when it comes to deer hunting. There's always a this and a that answer, and it just seems like Texas fits that mold perfectly because, like you just said, sometimes I've heard and talked to, a biologist down there that you guys get some of your best deer at 4, and like you said, sometimes they top off their biggest racks at 7 and 8.5. So it's just such a mixed bag. It's crazy, and it probably makes that job, not the easiest either.
Oh, absolutely, and it all boils down back to what we were talking to about, rainfall and nutrition. I mean, you get a good rainfall year, they're definitely going to peak out at a different age class than they would. Or if you let one go and then you go into a drought, and then all of a sudden that buck goes from being a mainframe 10-point to a mainframe 8-point. It's just like there's so many factors that you don't have control over that. It's what makes it challenging, but it also makes it so much fun.
It does, yeah, absolutely. One thing I wanted to just ask you two is, how do you guys, I know you mentioned the windmills and the water tanks basically, but what have you learned from that whole process, Bonnie and Mike? Do you guys, see a lot of your shooter bucks and like running cameras on those, or are you surprised at how much they don't come in and use that? And I'm sure that rule changes as well in a year like this when they're getting that natural browse and maybe some extra moisture. Well,
they have a tendency to show up just about all the time at a water hole. They're going to, when we get a lot of rain and all the natural, water holes fill up and ponds and stuff like that, well, they're going to go to them, obviously. But there's never really a downturn, especially because of the heat. Being in South Texas, we have pretty brutal summers. I mean, we have temperatures, 3 or 4 months out of the year in the 90s, and it can get up in over 100. It can get up 105. So, it's always so hot that water is such a key, especially when they're growing antlers. You can kind of get a pretty good inventory of what you have over water, over food, over anything else. You can catch them over water when it's hot and get a pretty good inventory of what you got, better than anything else, in my opinion.
Okay. Well, that leads into maybe the 2 deer you guys killed this year or the early season. So, Bonnie, if you want to start a little bit, what had you kind of learned, and what was your history with that deer, and what was your and Mike's game plan to get on that deer?
Mike actually had an encounter with that buck last year, and so he was down at the ranch before I was, so he knew that he was on the cameras and everything, and I had to come a few days after he did, and so my game plan was to just get out there and see if I could get on him. Really, and I was up to bat first, and a lot of times Mike likes to do that, and I'm not sure if it's just because he's trying to get me hunting and get me killed and out of the way, but
No,
I mean, he really.
we had
Mike's a team player, right, Mike? Let's get the ball rolling.
Yeah, he is a team player. He's always looking out for me in that area, I will say.
Yeah, and it's just because I'm down there probably a lot more than Bonnie, and running the cameras and that particular buck that she took, I did have an encounter with him last year, and I was on the bubble of shooting him last year because I was a 5-year-old. He was a good, heavy 10.5-year-old, and I was like, well, if he comes in the range, I might shoot him. And we went back and forth, and finally I was like, he didn't come in the range. I never really got a shot at him, but I stopped hunting him because I kind of felt like he could do, he would obviously do a little bit better the next year if he made it. And he was one of those deer that were fairly fun, but we let him go, and then we didn't see him a lot. We didn't hardly see him again on camera last year, so I figured the neighbors might have shot him. And then, so this year I was pretty adamant about running the camera over there, seeing if he was back, if he'd show back up. And it took a while, but he finally showed back up on camera, so we knew he was there. And Bonnie just got lucky enough to get in that blind, and he come out into that area, which was he wasn't, with all the rainfall, like I said, he wasn't really a regular. He just happened to show back up.
Wow.
It all worked.
What, from last year to this year, was this year a big difference in his jump, or did he change much, antler size, and was he, deer looks, I assume, to be 5.5?
He's 5.5, or he could be 6.5, but I'm pretty sure he's 5.5. He did change a little bit, but he didn't really grow hardly any at all. He put a little mess. I would say that's about it.
Man, he's got the most amazing G3s though, Bonnie. So that was pretty unique. I don't know what the length is on the G3s, but they're just amazing, and that's the first thing you notice on that deer's frame.
Yeah, he's framing.
Thank you. Yeah, I got a lot of compliments on those G3s.
I bet. Yeah, for sure. So that day, what had kind of triggered you guys, Mike, and to say, Bonnie, let's go, this might be the day? Was it just a certain weather pattern, or you just knew you had the right wind, or was it just based on the last time you checked that camera and thought, he's due to come back in here at some point?
Well, he had happened to be on that camera. It was a couple of things. We moved the blind over there when we first got there, just in case he showed up. That way, I like to put a ground blind out at least a couple of weeks, especially for whitetail, at least a couple of weeks before you're going to hunt it. Get them used to, you don't want them walking by that area they've lived in their whole life and freak out because they see something different. So we brush them in, but it's never, I feel like it's never really the same. But so we put it out a couple of weeks early, and we'd just been running that camera, and he had actually showed up the night before on that camera. So the wind was right, and we actually had a cool front blow in at the beginning of season this year, and we had 4 or 5 good days of pretty cool weather before it got really hot again.
Yeah, one of the mornings, or the opening morning, it was 58 degrees
which is
in South Texas,
incredible
which is
for us.
usually unheard of opening weekend, for us. So
yeah, that's got to be a huge cool front for you guys, right?
Yeah, you can actually wear a long sleeve shirt.
Yeah, so I would assume, the same rule applies. That kind of cold front, even though you guys are in South Texas, that's got to get the deer up and moving.
Oh, without a doubt. Just like everywhere else, when that weather pattern changes where it's 10 or 15, 20 degrees cooler than what it normally is, it gets them on their feet.
Now, for you guys, Bonnie, Mike, what is a cool front for you guys normally? I know that one's a drastic one, and probably you guys don't get it very often, but what would be a trigger to say, hey, Bonnie, we got to go right now, tomorrow's the day? Is it 5 degrees or?
No, it's got to be more than that. It's probably, down there, 20 degrees probably. Okay.
Now, and typically, do you guys get those for a day or 2 or 3 days? We just had one here. It lasted about 4 days, and which was still really rare in Michigan for the first, week of October. But how does your guys' run that pattern? Or you guys are kind of in a different, it's drier, things are different down there. So Do you
they
guys
move
get
out.
those? Yeah, I'm trying to spit it out, and I can't, guys. Sorry.
No, you're fine. I think they move out fairly quick. If a cold front blows in, usually if you get 4 days, that's a lot. Usually it's just a couple. You get a couple of cooler days, and then it starts warming back up. And, our average temperatures this time of year is mid-90s, mid to low 90s. And the mornings can be anywhere from 68 to 72, 73 degrees. So when you get a morning that's 50, it's like, oh, it's time to go.
Oh, man. Yeah.
But, and then that afternoon it'll heat up again. But when we do have a cold front, it does, it only gets up to 80.
Jeez, unreal. So that morning, Bonnie, you guys climb in the blind. It's 58. You're on this huge cold front. What happened? How much longer after daylight, and when did you guys start seeing deer?
Actually, okay, that morning, I was not in town yet. Opening morning, I was not in town. So skip forward one day to the Sunday, the day after. That's the day that I killed him, and it was an evening hunt, and we did. I mean, the weather was still. We climbed in, and my daughter was actually filming me. Georgia Kate was filming, and we weren't. There wasn't too much deer activity. Actually, we had some javelinas come in, different things like that, and so I was kind of thinking, well, it was my first sit. And so, I'm not anticipating that things are going to come together on my opening weekend of, archery season. So when he came out, it was a good surprise. She and I were both super excited. And he gave me a shot opportunity, and obviously I took it, and I was just so happy. It was, I can't think of, usually, it'll happen opening week, but to get down there on the very top of that is, you're not expecting something like that to happen. So to have it happen, we were all super excited, especially since, not to bring in the whole coronavirus thing, but I have been down all summer long fighting off coronavirus. So to be able to be back in the blind for the first time since I had been sick, it was just, I don't know, I was literally in tears.
Yeah, I bet you it was. I bet you it was crazy. And I bet you too, Bonnie, like, I know myself and probably Mike, like, it's a lot, to get in the stand in the blind your first time, and you kind of like just going through the hunt itself, like, you, so to speak, got to knock the rust off. So you literally climb in and shoot, like a world-class deer in the first night. I mean, talk about adrenaline, and especially after what you had, gone through all summer being ill.
Yeah, it was some serious adrenaline, and like you're saying, you do have to shake the rust off. It's like, okay, let's get back into this frame of mind, and once you get going, I mean, you're set for the rest of the season, but that first sit always is making sure you have everything and all of that. So, I mean, I couldn't have been any happier. It was just such an exciting moment. And I told Mike, I said, I really appreciate you setting me up for success, because, I just couldn't do it this year. So I couldn't be down at the ranch. Like, normally we're down there a lot, and like we've been saying, he was the one down a lot over the summer. So I have to give props to him for getting me in the position where I could be even hunting. I don't know if that makes sense. But.
No, for sure. And, that's awesome that Mike, did all that and got you to that point. And, just happy for you, Bonnie, that you, even got to recover enough to, experience awesome, amazing kind of remember the rest of your life type of hunt on your first night back.
For sure.
Yeah, super awesome. So you made the shot. What was the recovery like?
Well, it's a quick recovery. He didn't go very far.
He didn't go very far.
Oh, good.
So it was a quick recovery. We heard, George Kate and I heard him crash, and obviously she got on the phone real quick and called Mike, and we got everything filmed that we need to get filmed, and Mike and Harmon came in, and we recovered him, and it was how sometimes everything just basically goes right.
Right.
That happened. So
stars aligned.
The stars aligned. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, that's awesome. Well,
piled up, and everything worked out just perfect.
Man, that's amazing. Well, congrats, Bonnie. It's a heck of a deer, and I'm super proud of you, and super happy as well that, you recovered enough to, at least be able to get out and hunt some, and, I just think that's an amazing story.
I appreciate it, Brandon. Thank you so much.
So, Mike, let's talk about your deer, man, because it's just as awesome and, really unique. It's got that really cool short G2 that's split almost like a little flame, and, just a cool-looking buck and just as big and massive as well. So looks like a super older deer as well.
He was an older class deer. He's one of the heaviest deer that we've taken in a while. I mean, he field dressed right around just a little bit below 200 pounds this time of year, which is we don't have the weight. Our deer don't carry the weight because of all the heat that the Midwest deer carry, So when we get one that field dressed close to 200 pounds, he's a big deer for us.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Yeah.
But we, the picture buck that I was hunting, he had showed up on camera and had been really consistent. And then about typically how things work, a couple of weeks before deer season, he started not showing up as much on camera. And like I said, we had all that rain that it kind of changed their pattern a little bit. All those forbs started coming up, but he stopped showing as much. So we put a blind up over there. Where last time we saw him a couple of weeks ago, a couple of weeks before we killed him, and then just waited until the weather was right, the wind was right, slipped in there and had an encounter with him the first evening I sat there. But it was super windy. It was the day that Hurricane Delta was actually directly out in the Gulf from us, and we were getting some of the outer band activity, and the wind was just howling, and he was out there probably 45 yards, which I'm okay with that shot, but I mean, it was super windy, and I didn't want to stop him because they were all, when we get a lot of rain, our deer, or not a lot of rain, we get a lot of wind, our deer seem to be, when the wind's blowing 20, 25 miles an hour, they're just really jumpy. They're just looking at everything. They're not relaxed. They're not doing their normal thing. They're just they're kind of jumpy because I guess their defenses are down as far as being able to, hear stuff as well. So I didn't want to stop him. I just kind of let him go by, hoping he'd work his way back, our direction. And we never saw him again. We just had a brief little encounter with him. And so the next morning, the wind was still right. We got in that blind again and didn't hardly see any deer. And so I was almost discouraged enough where I was like, well, we'll try him this afternoon because everything was still good for that spot. I said, we'll try him this afternoon and see if he comes out. And believe it or not, he came out at the exact same time that he came out the night before, literally within a minute, and walked the same pattern that he'd walked before. But this time, the wind wasn't blowing as loud, and he stopped out there at about 35 yards, and I was able to get a good shot on him, and he probably went 40 yards and piled up. I mean, it all came together. Just like when I was looking at my clock, I had my watch figuring out, okay, we saw him yesterday at 6, and at like 5:59, I was like, well, is he going to walk out, you think, about the same time? About 6:01, here he comes. I mean, he popped out within a minute of the same time.
Man, that's crazy. So down there, do you guys have a pretty dominant wind? In what direction does that come from, Mike?
We do. It normally comes out of the southeast.
Okay.
But, that was one thing, everything was set up for kind of a southeast, but then we had, like I said, we had that hurricane out in the Gulf, and that was causing it to go clockwise. So, I mean, it was changing all day. It was changing from a southwest to a northwest to a northeast to an east, and then back to a west. I mean, it's just making a clockwise turn. And I mean, as that stream passes, and that kind of, like I said, kind of messed things up. But we normally set up everything for a southwest or southeast because that's normally what we have coming off the Gulf.
All right. So that day you ended up making a shot on him. The wind had calmed down. When you say it calmed down, what was the change in it?
Oh, it was almost none. I mean, it was like...
Oh, really? Okay.
it had gone from, the day before when we were in there, it had kind of it was starting to wrap around us, and it was blowing pretty good, but it had almost died down to nothing the day we actually shot him.
Man, that's fantastic. Yeah, what a deer, and it's is that a deer too, Mike, that you had had some previous history with and kind of had got to watch him throughout the years, figure out it's go time?
I did. We saw him last year early, and he actually had 2 kickers last year on both of his G2s. They were still short. Both of his G2s are short. He had tremendous 3s and 4s. He's kind of set up opposite of what you'd normally think of a whitetail as having bigger 2s, smaller, and he goes down as he goes forward. 3s all get a little shorter. This particular buck's deer, or this particular buck's rack, was like his G2s were short, but his 3s were long, and his 4s were long.
Yeah,
I mean, he had
3s and 4s.
Yeah, huge 3s and 4s, which is just kind of opposite. But we had seen him the year before, to answer your question, for a little bit. And he was on camera, and we actually hunted him last year and didn't get it done. I figured he's a 6 or 7-year-old buck this year.
Yeah, he looks to be super old. Just in the face, he looks to be older. And, one of the things I thought was so unique about that deer too, Mike, was, which you do see it, sometimes, but he's really knobby. Like all those little sharp little knobby points all the way to the base, all the way up to like his G2 basically, man. But that's just so unique looking. And usually to me, and I don't know if there's any truth to that whatsoever, but I've noticed it on older deer.
Oh, absolutely. I agree with that. And he had a lot of mass. His mass measurements were significantly, bigger than average. I would say his smallest mass measurement was close to just a little under like 4 6/8 or something like that. That was his smallest mass measurement. For us, we normally don't have a lot of mass on some of those deer down there. Some do, some don't, but he was extremely heavy.
Yeah, it looks like his bases to the start of the main beams up to his 2s, man. You can see the mass right there, which is pretty cool.
Yeah, he was. I was really happy and excited to get him, to shoot a buck like that, opening week of archery season. I was pumped.
Yeah, I would be too. That's amazing. Yeah, I'm pumped for both you guys. It's such an accomplishment to kind of shoot one early in the year, because you did your homework. It wasn't based on the rut, and as everybody says, the rut's so crazy, and sometimes you get lucky and you don't. You guys figured out a pattern and killed 2 giant deer, and that's, as we all know, that's hard to do.
Yeah, for sure. This time of year, when we felt like we had a really successful week of hunting, and it had its excitement too. Bonnie got back in the blind after a couple of days, or she got right back in the blind. But after a couple of days, after taking the deer, she was in the blind, and her George Carolina, the 5-foot rattlesnake come crawling in there with them, and that's a first for us.
Oh my goodness!
They had the camera rolling, and my daughter heard. George Kate heard the rattlesnake and looked out the window. She thought a deer was walking behind him. She heard the grass, but it was actually the snake pushing the grass down. She looked out the window. She saw 3/4 of his body facing the blind. So then she looked straight down, and his head and about 6 inches of him was sticking inside the blind. He was coming underneath it, and Bonnie and George Kate jumped out the front window.
Oh my gosh, that is nuts.
I had kind of posted about it on social media. I don't know if you saw it, but I mean, I just, like Mike said, that's never happened to us for the 20 years that we've been down here. It's never happened to any of us. Obviously, we've done a lot of ground blind sits, and that was probably one of the most terrifying things I've ever been through down there. Of thinking about what it could have been. But. We did. I mean, she just, when you hear somebody say rattlesnake, get out. And George Kate just started pushing me forward. Of course, I didn't know where the snake was, but oh my gosh, as soon as we bailed out of the windows, Brandon, he started rattling.
Oh my gosh.
All of our stuff obviously was inside the ground blind, and I mean, the hunt was over for that evening. Our hunt was over, and Mike's hunt was over.
Yeah, because I had to go pick him up.
He had to come pick us up. I mean, we were.
My goodness.
The camera because the tape was rolling. She was filming a kind of a unique buck. It's kind of he's a call buck, but he's just or what we call a call buck. He just had he had one rack, and then the other side just went straight up. Just went straight up, and they were about to shoot that deer.
We were thinking about shooting him.
Wow!
She was getting some really good footage of him. I mean, he would have been something really different for me, and but the snake had a different plan.
Different idea.
So, yeah, I'm just glad that she heard it. I'm glad that she was on that side and that she heard it. I don't really know how most people hear a snake coming through the grass, but
wow.
She did, and
it changed the rest of the week of hunting. I can tell you that everyone was looking down.
Everybody was on guard, so to speak. Oh my goodness. Yeah, how freaky.
That day, Brandon, at lunchtime, I was talking to our producer, Harmon Blanton, about snakes, that very thing. I said, it's like 93 degrees today. And I said, did y'all see any snakes before I got here? And he's like, no, we haven't seen any snakes. It's kind of weird that, we haven't had, at least seen one. So I guess maybe I was doing a very up-close encounter or something. I don't know. I'm going to stop talking about snakes now.
Oh, my goodness. Yeah. That's exciting, but the wrong kind of excitement, that's for sure.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh! But you guys had to jump out of the blind. It's just nuts.
Yeah, it's just it would be so funny to be able to show it on next season. But she was zoomed in on that buck, and so it really it caught our audio and kind of somebody's leg coming out of the blind, and then the audio, like Mike said. There's some choice words in there.
I bet. Oh my goodness, geez.
Out the window and hearing him rattle. When for her, she knew where the snake was, but for me, not knowing.
Yeah, you just somebody a snake in the blind. You're like,
yeah,
where?
Yeah.
You don't know if it's crawling up your leg or where it's at.
Yeah.
Oh my goodness. Well,
she was much more calm, cool, and collected than her mom. That's all I would say.
Oh, how crazy though. Well, at least it ended like that and nothing worse happened. So that's a good story. Right. Yeah. Well, real quick before I let you guys go, I kind of just wanted to touch on like Oklahoma and kind of your thoughts and plans of what you guys got going, for up there.
Well, Oklahoma, we're just now putting in our food plots. We're actually going down this next week to plant them, and we're going to start running cameras. We haven't run cameras. With the coronavirus, usually we go up there in the spring and the summer, but it's kind of been a different year, 2020 has. So we weren't able to get up there as much. Luckily, the guys from Inside Outdoors, their lease is literally just north of ours. There's one guy between us. We're actually hunting the same ranch. Leasing from the same ranch, they're up there quite a bit, so they can keep an eye on the place. Dave Poteet is actually up there. He's going to help me plant the food plot in a couple of weeks. We're gonna put cameras up and see what we have going. We didn't shoot a deer last year in Oklahoma because we had a bunch of encounters. We had a bunch of good deer on camera, but most of our stuff that we had last year, I felt like was too young. I felt like we didn't have enough mature bucks on there. There was a few, but we never had any encounters with them. But we had a lot of really good up-and-comers that we wanted to let go. So hopefully we'll have some of those on camera this year. We're just getting familiar. We got a new place. It's kind of like you don't want to go in there and just start guns a-blazing, and you kind of want to get a feel for it and make sure you're taking the right deer.
Yeah, absolutely. It's hard. I mean, as we all know, it's hard to trail, hard to hunt, and hard to manage ground that's, out of state. It just is a lot of work, and that's reality of the situation, that a lot of us face. But are you guys planning? I know, Mike, you guys got some good weather still yet to get the food plots in. Are you guys planning on maybe using Oklahoma as a later season destination this year?
I think so, yes. the beauty part about us hunting in Texas and hunting out of state is, our rut really doesn't kick off in South Texas till December. So we can spend November, Midwestern or somewhere hunting the rut and then go home and continue hunting the rut. So we usually do most of our hunting in South Texas in December. So that gives us all November to hunt the Midwest and hunt up there, in Oklahoma and stuff like that.
Yeah, absolutely. When's I would assume the rut is pretty much like a November-ish, Mike. It's not nearly what South Texas is. Yeah.
It usually, I would say 20th of November, somewhere around there, 15th. It's kind of like Kansas.
Right. Exactly. Well, that's super exciting. Well, I hope you guys the best. I know you guys got more deer hopefully to kill in Texas and, obviously Oklahoma. I hope it goes well, and I think it'd be a good story if we got back together, you guys kill some more.
Oh, we appreciate it. Absolutely.
Yeah, we'd love to.
Yeah, for sure. But yeah, absolutely.
The luck continues. We hope and keep it going.
Yep, for sure. I hope it does too for you guys. And you're off to a good start, so that's the hardest hurdle, right? So you guys have already done that. That's right. So, but Bonnie, let us know where we can find you guys and show times and all that stuff.
We're on the Outdoor Channel, and we are also on our social media platforms are all Legends TV, Legends of the Fall.
But yeah, I know you guys you do a lot on social media, Facebook and Instagram, and that's an easy way to find you guys. And that's where I keep updated pretty much on your guys' season. To be honest.
Yep.
Yeah, that's kind of how we stay updated on everybody, and we feel like that's how a lot of people see. That's our reach. How a lot of people see what we're doing. So we're trying to step up our game a little bit on social media and be a little bit more present. Obviously when we first started off doing all of this, there was no social media.
No.
It's a change for us to kind of adjust with the times, but we're doing it, and thank goodness we have young adult children that are helpful in that area. And
yeah, that's got to be huge.
It is huge.
For sure. But, well, thank you guys. I appreciate you guys. And like I said, I can't wait to do this again with you guys. And best of luck the rest of the year.
Thanks, Brandon.
Thank you. Same to you. Right. We'll come.
Absolutely. And every week, you guys know you can find us live on iTunes, Unfiltered Outdoors, and the Outdoor Podcast channel. And we'll see you guys again next week. And as always, guys, today's show was brought to you by HuntStand. Make sure to download the HuntStand app today. Both available on Android and iOS. HuntStand is by far and away the best hunting and mapping feature app I've ever used. Use the code TAKEAIM10 at checkout to receive a special discount on the Pro Plan today.